Okay, I welcome you to this course on managing change in organizations, and I hope that you will enjoy this course. In this course, basically we are going to discuss about the dynamics of change that is happening in the environment and how it is going to impact the organizations. We will also see that how organizations respond and cope with the challenges of the environment. So, to start with in this lecture, I will talk about some of the basics of change management, and then we will proceed further to see that what are the factors which are important, what triggers changes, and then we will take up some examples to see that how change is managed by the organizations. So, this topic on change management, we are going to start with the introduction of what is change, how can we define change, what is organizational change, and what is change management. So, now if you look at this, the concepts that we are trying to cover here is what is the nature of the organizational change, then we will discuss about the change managers and their image, and then we will talk about various perspectives of organizational change including the theories of change, and then finally, we will talk about the incremental and transformational change. So, these are the major concepts that we are likely to cover in this module. Now, to start with, I would like to define about what an organization is and how an organization functions. So, here we consider organization as an open system which has an input, the process and the output. Now, if you look at this figure, you can see that the input part is here, this is the input. Input of an organization include materials, resources, and these resources may include human resources, right, other kind of resources which is requires like technology, materials, finances, all of them are going to be called resources which is going to be used by the organization. Now, when we are using this input and it goes to the organization, there is a procurement system, and then organization itself has a system, and you can see that there is a boundary. It means that this input is coming, and then this is the boundary of the organization that you can see here. Okay. And then you can also see here the environment. It means that organizations operate in an environment. This environment is external to the organization, right. So, here we are talking about the external environment which is going to impact organizations, and then there is a external environment within the organization also, right. Now, within the organization you can see that we have lot of systems, subsystems which may be formal or informal, like what kind of a strategy is adopted by the organization, what are the goals and objectives, what are the operations that is performed by the organization to produce something, and what kind of technology is used, right. So, this is a part of the system of the organizations, because the organizations use certain operating systems, there is a technology which is used to produce or transform that input into output. Okay. They have a structure which shows the reporting relationship, which shows that who is going to do what, then they have certain goals and objectives for which they have been set up, and then a strategic direction which basically tells that what an organization is going to do in order to achieve the goals and objectives, and then there is a management subsystem, right. So, you have various functions that people perform like marketing, production, system, HR, right. So, these are the various formal subsystems. Then coming to the informal subsystems, you also have culture of the organization, the norms and values that people follow, the politics that goes on in the organization, and the kind of leadership style it is there. Now, if you look at this organization, both the formal and informal system which make up the organization is used to transform this input into what you call the output, right. So, basically this is a input output model where input is coming from the external environment, right, and then the organization processes these inputs using certain systems, subsystems, and then at the end of that you have certain outcomes or what you call output, like whether the organization has been able to achieve its goals and objectives which has been stated by them. and whether people are satisfied with what they are doing. So, output could be in terms of what you call products and services, which is produced by the organization using these inputs, okay, and also see that whether organization is able to perform well up to its satisfaction and whether people are happy and satisfied by working in the organization. So, the output could be at two different levels, individual level and organization level, and they are working in an environment. That is why you see a very clear boundary here, which is separated from the environment. Now, this external environment is going to affect the organization, and that is why the organization has to bring about a changes in their formal as well as informal system to cope up with the challenges of this environment in order to remain competitive in the market, right. And that is why this environmental factors become very, very important. So, any change effort is basically to bring about a change in the system of the organization, so that it is able to compete and survive in the market. Now, this change is triggered by various environmental factors, which we will take up later, but here what I would like to tell you that this in this input output model, basically the environment is a very important factor, because it is going to influence the organization and its working. Environment, it depends upon the kind of environment in which an organization is operating, okay, and what is the level of uncertainty in the environment. If environment is very uncertain, then organization need to go frequently change this kind of system. If organization operates in a more certain environment, then there are frequent changes in systems and subsystems. Okay. So, after discussing about the organization systems and subsystem, we move to the next part, and that is we will talk about what does it mean to say when I am talking about the change. Does it mean to transfer or convert certain things, or can we say that yes, within code change is the law of nature, everything in this world is changing. You will find that yes, your life is changing, the products is changing, organizations are changing, work is changing, spaces are changing. So, all kind of changes are happening in this environment, right. So, change is the only constant, right, as has been said by many people. So, it is very, very important to transform or convert depending upon the requirement of the change, right. And the statement says nothing is permanent except change. It means change is something that is constant. Everything in this world, whether it is related to your life, your work or organization, is undergoing the changes, right. So, if you look at the meaning of the change, it says that okay, it is related to transformation or conversion of something, and it is always happening because it is the law of the nature. So, things keep on changing as and when they are, and it is the only thing which you can say is constant. Okay. So, what is to be done? You need to change yourself also, or the organizations also need to change themselves depending upon the requirement. Okay. So, either you make or become different. If you do not make yourself adaptable to the changes, or if you do not become different depending upon the requirement, then you will it means that you have not been able to change as per the requirement, and there could be problems, right. So, the same thing can be said about the organization also. Organizations also keep on changing and transforming their products and services. Okay. They keep on changing their systems and processes, they keep on changing their cultures and systems, right, because if they do not change, then it becomes something what you call maintaining the status quo, and which is not good, because if you do not change yourself, then things are going to be different. So, when we are talking about the meaning of change, means that you are going through a transformation, organizations are also going through a phase of transformation, and it is something that is happening on a regular basis. It means the nature of the change is cyclical. It means all the time the change is happening. Now, when we are talking about that all the time the change is happening, it means what is our experiences. Now, if you look at this figure, you can see where you are standing today, okay, and how do you face or look at the new world which is going to be there tomorrow, and how are you going to take it up with yourself. And the same thing can be said about the organization, that how organizations are going to perceive the world today and tomorrow, because Today they are working, they have good products and services, they have good performance, good market, but not necessary that in the new world order they are going to be like that. So, what needs to be done? The path to move from today to the new world is not linear. You can see that it shows a non-linear path. It means there are ups and downs to reach and understand the new world. And for that what you need to do is to scan. As a manager or the organization, you are supposed to scan what kind of new world you are going to face tomorrow and how you are going to treat the path from today to tomorrow. It means that the way you have been doing, now if you look at this, the old way of doing things need to be changed and then you adopt new way of doing things in the new world, because the way you have been doing it today is not going to be successful tomorrow, right. And for that you need to identify the kind of new world that is going to be there tomorrow, and for that you need to scan the new world or you need to identify the kind of world that you are going to have tomorrow, right. So, basically if you look at this, it suggests that okay, we have been doing something in a very steadfast way, but we need to change depending upon the new things or the changes that is happening in the environment in the organization. Now, based on this, let us define about the organizational change, that what is organizational change. Now, when we are looking at organizational change, this suggests that it is a process through which you move from your present state to some desired future state. Okay. So, you are here today and tomorrow you are going to be something different, right. So, the change basically means a process, and through this process you move from your present state to some desired future state. But why you want to move to a desired future state? That is very, very important. The idea is so that you are able to increase your effectiveness. In order to remain competitive, viable and performing well by providing goods and services, you need to ensure that your competitiveness, your market share, your growth is maintained, right. And for that you need to move from the present state of affairs to a desired future state, right. And how come it is possible? That is how you are trying to improve yourself by using the resources and capabilities. So, in order to increase your effectiveness in a desired future state, what you need to do is you need to utilize all the resources. We talked about the various inputs like materials, peoples, technology, money, whatever materials that you are using, how you can optimally use these resources and the capabilities of the people to improve your effectiveness, right. So, that when you move to the desired future state, you remain competitive and viable, right. Because if you are not going to remain competitive and viable tomorrow as an organization, then probably you are going to have a bleak future, right. Then the downslide starts. And you can see that those organizations which have not been able to compete and remain viable are not existing, they cease to exist tomorrow. And if you have been able to improve your effectiveness by utilizing your resources and capabilities, and that is how you create value for the organization. Okay. This value could be in terms of economic value, it could be in terms of utility for the organization of whatever resources you are using. So, the basic idea of bringing about a change in the organization is to increase the ability of an organization to create value for whom? For all the stakeholders, maybe the employees, maybe for the customers, maybe for the management. So, if you are not able to create value for them in terms of utility and economic value, then you do not remain competitive. So, it is very, very important for you to ensure that when you move to a desired future state, you remain competitive and viable and keep on performing constantly well, so that you progress and create value for the organization. Now, this is what exactly I wanted to talk about, right. Now, if you look at this figure, you can see that how we represent change. There are three different stages, okay. That is your current state, and then you have the desired future state, right. This is the desired future state, and this is the transition state. It means that you need to move from this current state to this stage, that is desired future state. So, now if you look at this figure, you can very clearly see that in the current state means what? What is there today? What are the things that you have been doing today in order to perform well, right? Next stage is the transition stage, right? How you move from the current state to a desired future state. Here you can see that you need to move in such a way so that you are able to move effectively to the current future state, right? And that is where the change management comes in. So, that you need to bring about certain changes in different things that we will take up later, so that you are able to reach to a desired future state, because if change is not happening during this stage, then you cannot reach to this desired future state. So, the desired future state is what? How things will be there tomorrow. It means the way you have been doing things today will change tomorrow, because there are changes in the environment, or the factors of the environment may be say economy, technology, government legislation, social cultural values, right, customers expectations, everything is changing. So, depending upon the requirement of these environmental factors, you need to bring about a change in your system, your structure, your process, your culture, your technology, everything, right. So, say for example, you are using a certain technology for producing goods and services. Now, you need to bring about a new technology, so that you can be more efficient, because the idea of change is to improve effectiveness, as we have discussed earlier. Now, when you say that you want to bring about a new technology, so how do you successfully implement and institutionalize a new technology, okay, that is related to transition state. If you have been successful in bringing about and institutionalizing a new technology, then you can say that yes, you have been successfully reached to this future desired future state, and now you are going to make use of this new technology to be more efficient and productive, right. So, if when we are talking about organizational change, is nothing else but moving from the current state to a desired state through change management efforts, so that you are successful and remain competitive and viable. Now, this is organizational change, but what is more important here is to look at this factor, that how we take up this transition state. It means that how we manage change, that is very, very important, right. So, the next thing that we are going to discuss in this continuum is what is management of change. So, management of change means that how you effectively transit from your current stage to a future desired state, right. Now, when we are talking about these things, we have to look at it, that how management of change is defined here. So, if you look at the definition, it says that there are people who are going to take up this initiative, right, and this initiative is very concerted and conscious effort that is made by the people who are in charge of the change, right. So, this conscious and concerted initiative by those who are in charge of the change are very, very important, because it is their responsibility to see that what is the destiny of the business and what kind of business you are going to be in tomorrow, okay, and accordingly what kind of changes is to be brought in, right. So, when you are talking about the transition stage, that is the second stage, you need to see that what kind of initiative and efforts are required by the change managers to ensure that you reach to the desired future state, which is nothing else but the destiny of the business, okay, for which they are doing it, right. So, during this transition phase, you also need to see that what are the forces which are within your control, and what are those forces which you are not able to control, right. Maybe say there are certain environmental factors on which you do not have control. So, how are you going to deal with those forces which are not under your control? Say for example, there are certain economics ups and downs, okay, say price rise is going up, right. So, you need to keep a watch on those, on the behavior of those forces which is uncontrollable, say prices, right. For example, if you know I can tell you, say when we are importing oil and if the dollar prices are going up, right, then the prices of crude oil will go up, right. So, you are not having any control on these things, and if you are using it as a resource, then definitely the cost will go up. So, how we are going to manage these resources which are not under your control? But at the same time there are a lot of resources internally within the organization which could be under your control. So, you also need to assess and impact the influence of controllable forces like your employee behavior. So, can you suggest that maybe that cost factor is high, but we need to increase our efficiency and production to match the cost factor, right. So, you need to assess that how we are going to impact or say influence the controllable forces, whether they are within the organization or outside the organization, right. And then you develop certain strategies and action plan to see that how to make a balance, a equilibrium, and this equilibrium is not something that is static, it is dynamic, because it keep on changing between the controllable forces and uncontrollable forces. So, there are certain forces within the environment which are controllable, there are certain forces in the environment which are not controllable. So, you match and see that what kind of strategy you need to adopt in order to ensure that you are able to make a better balance between those forces to see that the organizations are doing what they want to do. Because if you are not able to control those forces which are even within your control, then you will not be able to grow and develop yourself. So, it is very important that all change efforts that is initiated by the change managers, they need to look at what are those forces which are within the control and what are those forces which are not under the control, and see that how they can maintain an equilibrium which is dynamic, because these controllable and uncontrollable forces keep on changing, right, and that is how they are able to better manage the change. It is something like this. See, now this person appeared to be the change manager, right. His job is to see that how he can change the things. So, for that he is going to look at the past, what has been happening in the past. So, he is going, okay, these are the things that have been doing well, and then there are lists which have not been doing well, and then he is to see that, okay, what are the new things that need to be done, right. So, it is the responsibility of the change managers to move from past to the new priorities, and in the process they are going to see what are the activities that they need to take up, what are the forces that they need to control, right, those controllable and uncontrollable forces both. Now, moving further, see, it is a tendency for all of us as an individual also to go for a change. Now, if you look at this figure, which is appeared to be blunt, but what is more important to see that what is happening actually, these people are running out, people are going out, right, people are doing something. It means that it shows something is there which is dynamic, or that is something that is not constant or keep on changing, right. See, all these examples that is given here denotes some kind of changes which is happening either in the individual or in the organization. Like when you are going to start a new business, or you want to go for a change in your job, when you want to try a new product, whether you go for a workout because you want to change yourself, or you want to change your career, or whether you want to bring about a change in your behavior, or simply you want to go on vacation to bring about some changes in your say daily schedule and these kind of things. Now, what does this basically show? That yes, we are always looking for a change, because we think that it is going to be good for us, right, but not necessarily that it is going to be good. For example, if you change your career, you may not be satisfied with that one, you try a new product, it may not be good, okay. Or when you are changing a job, you find that it is more difficult, right, and if you start a business, it might be a failure. But there are certain challenges which are associated with all these, and that is why people seek for change, and then they try to see that how they are going to meet with the challenges of the change. So, now this is a statement which is made that it is not the strongest who survived, not the most intelligent. It means who is going to survive tomorrow, not the strongest or the intelligent person. It is those who are going to survive, who are very responsive to the changes. Okay. If you do not respond to the change as an individual or an organization, then tomorrow you may not be able to survive. Okay. And how organizations are going to respond to the changes, you can see here by offering new products and services. Okay. entering into the new competition by offering products and services in those areas where they have not been there, right. They also need to identify the taste and preferences of the customers and accordingly offer products and services. Okay. They need to respond to the changes because there has been a major shift in say social, political, environmental and cultural framework. See, it is not only that the customers taste and preferences are changing, they are changing in the political environment, economic environment, the cultural environment and the social environment. Now, this shift in the social, political or cultural environment need to be looked into by the managers or change in charge and see that how they are going to respond to the changes which is happening in this kind of environment and how they are going to cope up with these changes. For example, look at the political environment, say if in case of political environment, you know that suppose there is a political party which is more responsive to the economy, but there is another political party which is less responsive to the economy, then how are you going to cope up with this kind of challenge, right. So, you need to see that how you can respond to the challenges which is created by the various environmental factors. Similarly, you know that there are a lot of changes which are happening in the technology, field of technology. In any kind of work environment, you will find that there has been shift in the technology. Okay. We have moved to the state of art technology. You will also find that now people have been replaced even by the robots. Okay. There are certain factories in many countries where you will find that equal number of robots are working along with the people and they are increasing efficiency. So, what I am trying to tell you is that you need to respond to the changes which is coming out of any of these factors, okay, and then you have to see that what are the new markets where you can sell your products and services, right. So, if you are not going to respond to the changes of the markets, of the competition by offering goods and services to suit their expectations, you may not survive tomorrow, right. And that is why this change also created lot of challenge for the individuals and the organizations. Now, another question is that why this change is important and why there is a need to respond to the changes which is coming out of the organization, right. You know that I already talked about that, yes, there is a lot of changes in information and communication technology. Okay. There has been, you know that internet has penetrated like anything in our houses today, right, and the associated technology which has basically changed the world of the work, right. So, this how this ICT is going to impact our lives, not only our lives, but also our work lives. Similarly, there are concerns about the change that is happening in the climate, right, and how climate change is going to impact processes, social processes and organizational processes, right. How companies are going to respond to these changes to create a more environment friendly products and services, right. And similarly, you will find that if you look at the economic and global forces worldwide, in addition to say US and Russia, there are local regional forces which are coming out like Singapore, Vietnam, China, India, okay, which are basically new economic and global forces, and they are going to give lot of challenge to you can say the strongest economic forces in the world like US or Russia. Similarly, another important thing that is happening in the world is basically there is a war on terror. You will find lot of terror activities happening and how it is going to impact businesses and organizations, right. And we also need to look at the consequences. So, there have been concerted effort by the government and nations to take up this war on terror and see that how they can combat these kind of things and how they can reduce the consequences of these kind of terror on societies and organizations. And another important thing is that since you are going to respond to the climate changes, you have to see that how you can create more sustainable world, okay. And for that businesses also need to understand their responsibility towards the society, okay. So, because of these factors, it is very important that you go for a change, otherwise you will not be able to compete, because if you do not follow the suit what is happening around us or in the society and the world or in organizations, then probably you will be lagging behind and you will not be able to compete. So, it is very important to look at these factors which are very important and how this is going to impact our life, our work and organizations. So, we have to see that what kind of impact change is going to have on our life, work and organizations. You see that what the changes that is happening everywhere, like the kind of technology that we are using yesterday and we are using today. There is a lot of changes. Okay. Now, if you look at technology which is moving to become more digital in nature, right, the customer expectations are also changing, the level of competition, the kind of competition has improved. Look at different sectors, whether that is aviation sector or say mobile sector, you can see that how the competition is challenging the organizations, and in what way organizations are going to cope up with the challenges that is created by the competition. The government has also come out with legislations to protect the interest of the stakeholders. So, if the government has come out with certain legislations, how organizations are going to cope up with this legislation? For example, now you know that you have a uniform tax policy, say goods and services tax, which is going to impact the organizations. So, how organizations are going to take up this challenge to ensure that going to smoothly inculcate these government legislations like GST into their systems and processes, right. There has been change in the economy, okay, everywhere in India and also abroad, where you will find that lot of some countries are facing crisis, some countries are in debt, are having economic and financial crisis. In some countries the growth has almost stranded, they stagnated, while some countries are going very fast. So, the economic development is also going to affect not only our life and the way we are working, but also the organizations. Then the communication media, which is very important. The growth of internet technologies that I talked about has changed the way we live and work, right. Then the value systems of the people and the societies, right, that has also changed. And then how organizations supply and distribute goods and services. So, the entire supply chain has undergone for a change, right, because the technology has changed. So, if you look at the impact of change on our life, there has been tremendous impact not only on our life and the way we work, but on the organizations, and that is why organizations also need to look at these changes and see that how they can cope up with this kind of thing. And finally, I am going to discuss a very important case just to explain that not all changes are going to be successful, and this is a very famous .com boom that happened in the 90s, late 90s, 2000 you can say, and this is known as the case of .com companies. You know that when internet technology came into existence and there was a boom of ICT, lot of .com companies came into existence, not only in India, but across the world. And what happened to these .com companies? Okay. Most of these .com companies did not survive, forget about the growth and development, okay, because they faced lot of challenges and they were unable to cope up with the challenges, and that is why most of these .com companies did not survive, right. What was happening in the organizations at that point of time? Lot of mergers and acquisitions were going on, companies were merging with each other, right. New technologies were coming, new competitors were there, okay. Markets were going down, economies were depressed, I mean the economic growth was lowest at its level. Most of the companies has merged went for demergers, right. Customers, suppliers, competitors almost collapsed. So, this was the situation, and because of that you will find that most of these .com companies could not survive, forget about the growth and development. So, what I want to say here is that the change of impact could be drastic. If you are not able to compete, if you are not able to take up the challenges of the environment, if you are not able to consolidate your position or reposition yourself to grow and development, then tomorrow you cease to exist as an organization, right. And this presents a very strong case that how we manage change effectively in the organization, right. And with this case we want to finish this. Thank you very much.